You had a lovely jaunt this week, Will, to Oxfordshire, except it was to a huge pile of trash.
Yes, I went to see a giant heap of crap, and I'd just like to really personally thank everyone who was involved in that decision. All the people in the meeting who suggested that I go there rather than going to like a nice business conference, and
for our listeners who weren't in our editorial meeting when this was decided, we all basically conspired to send you to the trash heap when you were pitching very heavily to go to the CBI conference instead.
I was, yeah. And which was in London, and had a nice lunch, and easy access to politicians. Whereas, this involved driving 2 or 3 hours each way. But Ed Davey turned up, so it was all right in the end. So this is a giant heap of rubbish, which our listeners might have seen on social media or in the news. It was reported first to the authorities in May, and the Environment Agency recently got a court order to close access to the site. But at some point during this year, basically a gang of organised criminals started using it as an illegal rubbish dump. And the scale of the trash there was incredible. So it was kind of... it's about 150 metres long, the main trash dump. There are a load of other dumps of trash around it. And it's probably kind of, I suppose, maybe a better way to put it is it's probably like 2 or 3 houses wide and a house deep and a whole street of houses long.
Wow.
It was just enormous.
Well, you've written an excellent sketch of your visit in the New Statesman this week. And for any of our listeners or viewers who haven't actually seen the images, do go and look them up. But Will has an excellent description of it, which is load after load of trash was piled up, filling the little strip of land to a depth of 30 feet. At the northern end, the rubbish emerges in a towering slope that spreads out from the end of the strip like ice from the mouth of a fjord. So poetic. Clearly, there was something about the rubbish that caught your imagination.
Yeah, maybe some of the fumes coming off it.
You said that it actually started steaming later in the day.
It did, yeah. It has begun producing its own heat as it decomposes inside. I mean, you could see actually there was kind of seemed to be sort of moss growing on it. I thought I spotted a small sapling growing up out of a mound of trash at one point. So it's been there a while, and that for a lot of people in the area was the question. Like, how is it possible to dump hundreds, possibly thousands of tons of rubbish in a relatively small field? And I mean, it is right next to a dual carriageway.
Mm. Yeah, explain how this happened.
Well, I mean, on the one hand, it does look absolutely incredible that this giant environmental crime was committed for months without people noticing. And on the one hand, I can see how that happened, because although it's right next to dual carriageway, who really looks out the window certainly while driving along a dual carriageway? Maybe if you're a passenger, you wouldn't necessarily be paying that much attention, in a few seconds while you're going past a field. And anyway, if you saw, some lorries and diggers in a field moving stuff around, you just think it was legitimate activity. So I can sort of understand why, the general public didn't necessarily call it in. But also the fact is they did call it in May. Mm. And then, so the Environment Agency, I was told they tried to get into the site in July. And fair play to them, not necessarily that easy to go into a field full of organised criminals in the process of committing a big crime. They're probably not that keen to host the Environment Agency on their land. So, but then the dumping apparently continued until September. So, this was going on for ages while the authorities knew about it. And I think there are like some questions about, why were they not interrupted or deterred from continuing to do something that was pretty obviously illegal?
Yeah, and who are these organised criminals?
Well, there has been one arrest, and the name of the person who owns the land has been reported. But, this was obviously seriously organised activity. So I observed, that clearly earthworks had been done.
Right.
And obviously to move that volume of trash within that amount of time would have taken a lot of lorries. So, clearly they've got fairly significant resources at their disposal. And also, the other thing that was noticeable about the trash, other than the sheer volume of it, was it had been macerated, had been shredded. So this is trash that has come from a processing plant. So presumably that is, a contract has been signed with somebody there to, take this stuff away, and it was supposed to go to landfill. So at a recycling centre, a lot of any stuff that can be recycled gets taken out, and then all the other stuff gets shredded and taken to a landfill site. And the company that takes it to the landfill site would take a certain amount of money taking it off the recycling centre, and then, they'd be paid a certain amount of money by, for example, the council, and then they take it to the landfill site and they'd pay a gate fee of £25 a tonne, and then they would pay landfill tax of £126 a tonne, something like that. Or if you're criminal, you just take it and dump it in a field for free and pocket the difference of, £150 a tonne. So over if you've got a 20-tonne tipper lorry, that's £3,000 a lorry. And if you're doing that hundreds of times, then you're making a lot of money. And that's what they were doing for months and getting away with it. And yeah, I said there has been an arrest, but, organised criminals, it might be that the people who actually ended up with the money, we're not sure if they've been arrested yet, whether it's just the drivers. It's
really interesting, isn't it? Because it would be quite scandalous, wouldn't it, to find out whether it was a council that signed this contract, because it means that they're not doing due diligence on whoever they're subcontracting to do their taking stuff to landfill.
Yeah.
But then a lot of these sites are, have been already outsourced to private companies as well. So perhaps it shows that there's a breakdown in that process somewhere. Yeah.
The waste supply chain, I think that's the right term for it. Maybe it's not supply chain, but that waste chain is very complex, and I guess it's probably it might be quite difficult to oversee all of the links in it, and it might also be that, like you say, these are contracts being signed between private companies. I think somebody told me it's pretty easy to establish a company, just as it's really easy to set up a company on Companies House. And so it is probably fairly easy to get around what due diligence measures there are in place. And that results in, there's an opportunity there that for a criminal gang is a lot lower risk than, the illegal drugs trade or, other forms of crime. And so, unfortunately, we see a lot more of this kind of thing as sort of gangs kind of gravitating towards where the easy money is to be made in, fundamentally, this is tax evasion, but, things like tax evasion and fraud.
Yeah. In fact, my column this week in the magazine is about organised crime creeping into our day-to-day lives. We always associate organised crime with things that happen in TV dramas, like, I don't know, people smuggling or drug dealing.
Yeah.
But actually, sometimes it can be much more banal. Shoplifting is now an organised crime activity where people shoplift things to order.
Yeah.
Phone theft, car theft, other things that feel quite banal.
Yeah.
Are now the preserve of organised criminals.
It's weird, isn't it? It's a great column, by the way, from the car boot sales.
Yeah, I didn't actually get to spend any New Statesman expenses on stuff from the car boot sale.
But you followed in the footsteps of Robert Jenrick.
I did, as I always do. Standing on the shoulders of giants.
And so what did people, I have to ask, what did people at the car boot, Were there a lot of Jenrick fans there?
They honestly laughed when I mentioned his name. Yeah. I didn't put that in the piece because I actually thought he was onto something with his this particular stunt that he did. But yes, I mean they were quite amused by it because he'd been walking around, as you can see in the video, saying, and the police are doing nothing about it. Where are the police? But actually the police go so often. They were actually there the morning of my visit. And also that's an important point from the piece, which is actually, bobbies on the beat, uniformed police aren't necessarily the people who are going to nail these organised criminal networks anyway.
Yeah.
But let's go back to the trash heap just lastly, because it's interesting that this comes in the context of polluted rivers, also the fatberg, remember that?
Yeah.
That pile of PPE, the PPE mountain that couldn't be used. I think you went to go and see that as well, didn't you?
I did. I sort of phoned up all the people around it,
right.
And got some quite angry responses from the people in the yards around it, and then I don't think I would have been allowed on the land itself. Maybe next week I can go sort of canoeing to Wet Wipe Island.
Yeah, Wet Wipe Island. I mean, I don't think there's anyone who's not now seen this vision of, a river with some loo roll in it. And it just feels like the country's quite dirty. But it's important because I don't think there's that many politicians who are really running on this now that the Greens have taken their Polanski turn where they're talking more about economic injustice.
Yeah.
Apart from, you say, Ed Davey was there. So is he sort of the voice for environmentally concerned Brits now?
I think he might be. Well, I mean, I think the Lib Dems have ploughed this particular furrow or furrowed this particular brow for a long time. I remember going to the Tiverton and Honiton by-election, so that would have been 23, I think, and observing Ed Davey in a river in some waders with his Lib Dem candidate there. They were doing some phosphate testing. I mean, it makes sense for them as a policy issue, I guess, because a lot of their voters are in slightly more rural constituencies. They're kind of they're kind of fighting rural conservatives in a lot of places in the West Country and the home counties, things like that. And I guess that is where that sort of conservatism that is environmental conservatism is most likely to sort of take root. A lot of dog walkers, people with nice gardens, people who like wildlife. Yeah. And I don't think there's a lot of people who don't like wildlife, and I think Ed Davey is also, just personally as a politician, he is very good at turning up at things and frowning, isn't he? So
yeah. You're just reminding me of a time when I was door knocking. I can't remember. I was in Berkshire actually door knocking during a local elections. I can't remember which year it was. I think it must have been 23 actually. And one woman just opened the door and immediately went, "Are the swans all right?" And I was like, okay, this is definitely a demographic.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which demographic, but it is important. It's in the air.
Yeah. It really is. It's that sense of a country that has kind of lost control of its natural environment.
Yeah.
And I think that there is kind of rich, there's a lot of political capital to be made there by the right politicians. So I think it is a smart thing to go after.